Okay, Mr. LaPrenzi, you can call your next witness.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please take the stand there behind you.
Good afternoon, sir. If you would, please introduce yourself to the jury by telling them your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
My name's Larry Capitoni, Capitoni.
And sir, what do you do for a living?
I'm a general contractor.
Okay. And that's your regular
That's my
full-time
regular
job?
Right.
Do you have other forms of income?
I do concealed carry classes and firearms instruction.
All right. And how did you come to start teaching those type of classes?
Oh, I've been shooting since I was a kid. I've shot competitively for years and just got involved in concealed carry doing that.
All right. And do you personally own or have your own carry conceal
I do.
license? Okay. And I'm assuming you're a gun owner?
I am.
Okay. When you give do you give training classes for the CCW on a regular basis?
Yes.
And how regular do you teach the class?
Twice a month.
And how many classes have you, if you know, estimate, taught since you've been doing this?
Hundreds. Hundreds.
And tell us a little bit about the class. First of all, how many people would be in the class?
We limit the class to 12. Generally, a class is 7 to 10 students.
And why do you limit it to 12? Why can't you have a class of 50?
Better instruction.
Okay. So let's talk about the instruction. Is there certain parameters or guidelines that you must follow to be allowed to do this in the state of Ohio?
The Ohio recognizes NRA instructors and OPATA instructors.
And what's OPATA?
OPATA is a law enforcement that has gone through their instructors training.
Okay, and OPATA stands for Ohio Police Officers Training Academy?
Yeah, Ohio, yeah.
Okay. And so there are guidelines in which you have to follow and make sure you do in order for the person who's
Correct.
getting the training to be able to qualify for CCW?
Yes.
So how long is the course?
State requires 6 hours of classroom and 2 hours of live fire range time.
All right, so a total of 8 hours.
Correct.
And is that what classes that you do?
Yes.
Which comes first, the in-class or the range time?
Actually, it's a little bit of both. We do 4 hours of classroom, 2 hours of range time, and then finish up 2 hours, the last 2 hours.
All right. And what's the name of your
Defensive Edge.
Defensive Edge? Okay. And you're not in Summit County, is that correct?
I am not. I'm in Portage.
Portage County. So tell us now, let's start with the firearms portion of the training. It's 2 hours. What do you do during that period of time?
We take them out to the range. Before we get to the range, we have all the basics of safety and function and those things. At range time, we fire generally at least 50 rounds each student.
Okay. And do you, during that period of time, I should ask you, where's the range? Is it
It's on my property.
Okay. So you have classroom on your property and a range on your
Correct.
property. During the range time, do you then monitor, watch the students to make sure that they are following
Absolutely.
proper safety practices?
Yes, I do.
Is there a certain amount of proficiency that is required in order to get a carry concealed weapon license?
Not according to state requirements. The state leaves it up to instructors to attest that the student is competent.
And so you watch them, make sure they're hitting the target. That's not to be bullseye every time, but somewhere in there, they're able to safely load and fire their weapon in a safe manner.
Yes, they have to physically demonstrate they are competent.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the training now. Tell us how your training is organized?
As in,
Like the classroom, they come in, you're going to do some introductory stuff,
We-
and then is there an outline of your training?
yes, we start out with safety, then we go into function, we go into responsibility, ammunition identification, function, how things work. Mostly it is a basic introduction to safety, responsibility, and function.
All right. And when you talk about responsibility, what is that portion of the training about?
That would be how to store, how to be responsible with it, what it means to be responsible, preventing unauthorized people from handling your firearm.
Okay. And then what would the next portion of your training be about?
Then we would go into ammunition, how it works, how the pistol functions, shooting fundamentals, and then we generally head out to the range by then.
All right. And is there a certain allotment of time that you have for each one of these sections?
I do.
Okay. What's the first section? How long is that scheduled?
We spend about an hour on the safety rules, hour on ammo and function,
Okay.
maybe 40 minutes on, hour to 40 minutes on shooting fundamentals,
Okay.
responsibility an hour or so. It's all broke down.
All right. And then how long, you said you're on the range for a couple hours. Is that
2
all in the
hours.
same 2-hour span, or is it broken up?
No, it's 2 hours, 2 hours complete.
And then at some point in time, do you talk about the laws in the state of Ohio regarding
Yes.
when you can carry, when you can't carry?
That's typically, I devote 2 hours to that, and that's usually the end of the class, the last 2 hours of class is devoted to that.
And at some point in time, do you then talk about self-defense
As in,
as part of your training? As
Oh, yeah,
when you can use deadly
absolutely,
force?
yeah, we cover the manual, and in the manual, the specific conditions to the right to self-defense are listed specifically.
All right. And actually, I said, talk about self-defense, but I think the topic would actually be deadly force.
Lethal force.
Okay. How long do you spend with your students on that topic?
Lethal force, probably about an hour. It'll vary depending on how many questions
Sure.
they will have.
And is it fair to say that typically in that section, lethal force, that's where you probably have a lot of questions?
We have lots.
Okay. And that is people wanting to know, when can I shoot and when can't I shoot?
Different scenarios they'll bring up.
Okay. In your training, do you emphasize when you should be using lethal force?
Yes,
And what is your emphasis in your course?
last resort.
Last resort. And why is it a last resort in your course?
Why?
Yes.
It's a very serious thing.
In regards to what you hand out in your class, I should ask you, do you hand things out in your class?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to show you what I've marked as State's Exhibit number 6 for demonstration purposes. Tell me if you recognize that.
Yep.
What is that?
This is the Ohio Concealed Carries Laws Handbook, they typically call it.
Okay. And is that one of the things you hand out in
It
your...
is, yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and hold on to that. You hand that out in your course, you said?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And in that book that you hand out, that includes what type of information?
This includes the basic rules and regulations pertaining to concealed carry and use of lethal force.
And a lot of the things that you teach in your course are actually in this book, is that true?
It is.
Okay, so why can't we just hand this book out, give it to everybody and go, okay, read the book, did you read it, sign it, okay, here's your CCW?
Because state requires more than that.
Okay. And so you actually discuss these topics, is that
After
fair?
we cover this book
All
in
right.
detail.
In the index, is there a section in that handbook about deadly force?
There is the use of, the conditions, the specific conditions are listed.
Well, no, in the index, of the book, does it list deadly force as a topic?
In the
In the front.
of the book. I don't know. Does it list deadly force? It mentions lethal force. Yes, it does. Deadly force,
Okay, what page is that on?
16, 21.
16 to 21 is listed as deadly force, is that fair?
Yes.
And in that section, do you go over these particular areas in the course?
In detail.
All right. So tell us about how you would go about doing this section of your class. With your
This
students.
section, I explained to them that they have the right to use lethal force in Ohio, but they have to meet specific conditions
Okay.
before the use of is justified.
All right. And what are the conditions that they must follow?
Can't be at fault.
This, if I got a second.
Okay, sir. The court has overruled the objection, so you can go ahead and answer the question if you remember it.
Yeah, you were asking what the specific conditions are?
Correct.
Specific conditions,
And so just to clarify, this is what you teach in your course?
yes.
Yes, thank you,
Yes.
Judge.
The first condition is that you couldn't have been at fault. You couldn't have started the altercation. Condition 2, a reasonable, an honest belief of serious bodily harm or death. And condition 3 is a duty to retreat. Simply put, if you can get away, you're compelled to.
All right, and do you make that clear in your course?
I make that abundantly clear.
All right, and so when you go over this in class, you said how much time you spend on this area?
Oh, and on the specific conditions, we'll spend 40 minutes to an hour on that.
All right, so I'm not going to ask you to do that here, but can you give us, at least some of what you would tell, how you would tell your class? And I'm assuming, do you do every course pretty much the same?
I do.
All right. So you may not remember a specific class, but you can tell us that you would have done it that way because that's
I
what you
can
always
give
do
you an
it?
example of condition 1 to elaborate on it, not fault, also not pursuing it. Example, I use the example of a road rage. Someone ran you off the road, you got back on the road and chased them down. They got out and with a gun and you shot them, you'd be at fault because you were no longer. Once they left and you pursued them, you were no longer in immediate harm. So you can't do that. That's one example. A reasonable and honest belief of danger is also a sliding scale. What's dangerous to a 90-year-old woman being attacked by a man with just her hands may be justified, but a 40-year-old man being attacked by a 80-year-old woman with just her hands will not be justified. Those are the kind of things. Duty to retreat, I tell them not to overthink it. You either know you can get away or you can't get away.
Okay. And these examples you give, are these meant to be extreme examples, an 80-year-old woman versus a 40-year-old man?
This is to get the reasonable and honest belief of serious bodily harm is to let them know that's a sliding scale. What seriously bodily harm to one person may not be to another.
And so when a person then asks you in your class about the hypotheticals and say, well, what if a guy that's 60 and a guy that's 50 are fighting, then how do you kind of answer those questions?
I don't, I won't let them go too far with hypotheticals because we can do what ifs forever.
Right.
So I just, a common sense thing, if it's going to cause you serious bodily harm or death, you better make sure it will if you're going to use lethal force.
All right, so basically when you say, when you're trying to decide these scenarios for yourself, whatever you do, you better make sure?
You better make sure.
Okay. What, if anything, do you talk about in regards to duty retreat? Do you give any examples of that?
Example of that, I don't, because that's one of those things that will go on forever. What if, what if, what if? I just simply put it, you'll know when you're there whether you can get away or you can't.
Okay.
And it's all specific and contingent on the time and what's going on, what's happening in place.
Now, you also have in this booklet a section on defense of others. Is that
Yes.
correct? Tell us what you teach about defense of others.
We have the right to defend others, to use lethal force to defend others, but those others have to meet those same conditions. They had to. They couldn't have been at fault. They had to be in serious jeopardy of serious bodily harm, and they had a duty to retreat as well.
All right. Do you give an example in your class about somebody called Lou?
Lou. I
You
do.
use
That's in defense of other. I use Lou is Louise is her name. She was the mother of my best friend where I grew up. Lou was like any other mom to me, but till I became an adult, Lou was a very violent woman, and I wasn't aware of that. Lou was only like 100 pounds, very petite, good-looking woman. She had a very violent past. She actually murdered her third husband and went to prison for it. And I use the example, if you turn the corner and you see a 30-pound or a 30-year-old young healthy man on top of a 60, 70-year-old woman, our reaction may be that that little old lady's the bad guy, but it, or
Little old
good
lady's
guy.
the bad guy?
And what's that?
You said who's the bad guy?
We get the thought, we see that a young person beating up a elderly woman, we may think that he's the bad guy. That woman on the ground may have been Lou, and Lou may have just tried to knife him or his loved one or something like that. So I stress to be very, very cautious before we involve ourselves in a self-defense of others if we don't know what's going on.
So the point is, in your course, if you were to then use deadly force against the 40-year-old man,
You are in trouble.
and you tell that in your course.
I do.
Sir, I want you to look at pages 16, and the bold headline in that is what?
Deadly force.
Okay. And then it goes on, it has different headings: introduction, criminal issues, civil liability, self-defense. Then it talks about conditions 1 that you talked about, defendant is not at fault. It talks about the castle doctrine. Then it talks about defense of others. In that whole section, 16 through 21 on deadly force, is there anywhere in there other than the headings that has a warning and a big bold paragraph?
Oh, you mean, yeah, on page 20?
Yes.
Yes, there is.
So in the entire deadly force section, that's the only place that has this, a warning and bold
Not to take
writing.
law into your own hands.
All right. Your Honor, if I could. Up the screen here. And sir, I'm going to ask you to actually read that section that's in the handbook. And I'm going to put it up here. Look at the screen, does this appear to be the same as what's in your book? And I'm going to...
It does. The law specifically, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
The law specifically discourages citizens from taking matters into their own hands and acting as law enforcement. This is true even if you think you are performing a good deed by protecting someone or helping law enforcement. The Ohio Supreme Court has ruled that a person risks criminal charges if he interferes in a struggle and protects the person who is at fault, even if he mistakenly believed the person did not create the situation.
And I'm going to instruct the jury at this point that this is what this gentleman teaches in his course.
It may or may not be the correct law in the state of Ohio. As we discussed with all of you in voir dire, the law will come from me and I will give you instructions of the law in the state of Ohio. Okay?
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Capitoni, warning shots, is that something you teach in your course?
It's not something I teach.
Okay, why not?
I think it's irresponsible and reckless.
Why is that?
Because you're shooting shots, you don't know where they're going.
All right. That is not part of any training you do for firearm safety?
It's not
and
part of
response?
any training I'm aware of.
Okay, and how long have you been shooting guns?
I've been shooting since I was a kid.
And what kinds of, are you a member of any clubs or groups or?
I have been. Crooked Creek Conservation Club is one, and I've shot competitively as well.
All right. And nowhere in your background history of shooting have you ever been taught or trained that warning shots are proper?
I have not.
Okay. In that handbook, in the center of that handbook, there's a insert, is that correct?
That's right.
And what is that insert?
That is the application that you fill out to submit to the Sheriff's Department.
All right. And once you take the course, you fill that application out, and then what?
Then you will take the other requirements you need, which are the competency certificate is what you pay the instructor for. You'll also need a passport photo, driver's license, and money for $67.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as State's Exhibit number 7. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is that?
That is the competency certificate each student gets when they complete the course and pass the course.
Okay. And is that an actual copy of an original
it is.
certificate?
Yes, it is.
Is your signature on that?
Yes, it is.
What is the date that you signed that document?
1/7/2017.
And who is that certificate for?
William M. Knight.
All right, so William M. Knight took your course?
Yep.
Okay. And do you remember Mr. Knight at all?
Not really.
Okay. But you know that William M. Knight took your course and then submitted an application with that certificate, correct?
I assume he has submitted his with this app. I'm not there at the Sheriff's Department when you fill out the application, but yeah, he would have had to have this.
And if you gave that certificate to William M. Knight, he would have had to have gone through your course.
Yes.
And he would have heard all the things you've told us about that
Yes.
you teach in your course on
Yes.
every course. I'm going to show you what I've marked as State's Exhibit number 8 for identification purposes. And Your Honor, I guess for the record, Mr. O'Brien is, I guess, stipulating to the content of this being this, as Mr. Knight's application, but I'm just going to show it to the witness for purposes of State's Exhibit number 8. That's an application which purports to be from William M. Knight. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And you wouldn't have seen this. You
I
don't
would have not.
identify that as
Right.
ever seeing that.
Correct.
But is that the application that would have been inside the handout that you give?
Yes.
That's that form?
Yes. You can also download it online.
Okay, very good. Sir, I have no further questions for you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Capitoni, I'm Kerry O'Brien, and along with Jacqueline Plummer, we represent Mr. Knight. You indicate you're a general contractor,
I am.
and is that a 40 or 50-hour a week position?
30 to 50,
Okay, depending on the weather.
depending on work schedule.
Sure. And every 2 weekends, I think it would be, you devote 8 hours each one of those weekends or so?
Well, it's more than that.
Right, preparation.
Right.
But class and range instruction is 8 hours
Correct.
each week, those 2 weekends, okay? The book that you have there, sir, that's an exhibit, or do you have it over there? Referring to State's Exhibit 6. This is the book that you would have used. Is
Yes.
that correct, sir? Okay. And actually, this book really didn't go into effect until March 21st
Correct.
of 2017. Is that correct?
That's if whatever the date is on that.
All right. So you would have been using a different book. Is that correct? On March 20th?
Yes.
Or before March 20th, 2017?
Mhm.
Okay. That book is really a guide only, isn't it, sir?
That's what I tell him it is.
Okay. It's not a substitute for professional legal advice, is it, sir?
Correct.
That book is not cited by a court of appeals or the Ohio Supreme Court as an authority, is it?
I don't know.
The phrase, you were using the phrase last resort, is that correct?
That's my phrase.
Right, okay. At any place in those 5 pages between, I think it was 15 or 16 to 21, is the phrase last resort listed?
It is not.
The duty to defend others is like Mr. LaPrenzi just said, in that guide though.
Yes,
It is recognized by the state of Ohio.
Not duty. You have the right to defend others.
Correct, right. In terms of a duty to retreat, sir, there's no absolute amount of time ever listed, is there?
Not that I'm aware of. Not in that book.
Circumstances would dictate whether a person even has the time to retreat. Is that correct, sir?
I agree with that, yep.
Handing what's my mark for purposes of identification as defendants A, first, you don't process the permit itself, do you?
I do not.
That's the sheriff's duty in each county?
Yes.
Okay, but you would recognize a permit, would you not, sir?
I would.
Okay. Handing with defendants A. There's 2 licenses on there, sir, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. The bottom one is a regular driver's license.
License.
All right. The top one, what is the top one, sir?
Concealed carry handgun license.
All right. Does it appear to be valid?
It does.
All right. And it was issued, I think, January 15th, 2017?
January 10th, 2017.
That's what I get for not putting on my glasses. All right. So on March 20th, 2017, this license would have been valid, sir?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Just briefly. Mr. Capitoni, you and I actually discussed the date.
Yes.
We were going to talk about that and we forgot. Tell us, we discussed this, the fact that this publication begins on March 21st, 2017, yes?
Correct.
I asked you then, in regard to this book, this section on deadly force, had that changed anything?
There were no changes in that.
Just because she's taking this down, we're going to make sure I finish the question, okay? Were there any changes to the section 16, pages 16 through 21 on deadly force?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And we did talk about, well, what were the changes, correct?
Correct.
And what were the changes that you were aware that were changed in this book from the previous book?
The changes were in allowing us to carry in more places. The conditions hadn't changed, just an example, airport terminals we can now carry in are one of the examples.
All right. So the section we referred to and talked about, the only section we talked about, that is unchanged?
Did not change.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down.
He's going to call Mrs. Sprague.
Okay. Oh.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. You can take the witness stand right there.
Sir, would you please tell us your full name and spell your last name?
Isaac Orlando Spraglin, Spraglin, S-P-R-A-G-L-I-N-G,
And how old are you?
47,
And where do you presently live?
797 Danby, Akron, Ohio.
And that's within the boundaries of Summit County, Ohio, is that correct?
Yes,
And how long have you lived at that address?
approximately 20 years.
And can you tell us, the jury had an opportunity to see the outside of the residence today, but can you kind of give us a layout of the house? As far as if I walk in through the front door, kind of take me from there.
When you walk in the front door, it's a living room. Straight back is the kitchen. Next to it is the dining room. Down the hall is the bedrooms and the bathroom.
As far as, is it a single floor, like a ranch type
Yes,
of house?
it's a single flat, yes.
And is there a garage that is either attached or unattached?
It's an unattached garage
Okay, and where is that located in reference to the house?
in the backyard.
And we're going to be discussing March of last year. Were you living with anyone there at that time?
No, I wasn't.
Mr. Sprangley, as far as living in Akron, have you lived there your whole life?
No, I haven't lived there my whole life.
Okay, where else have you lived?
I've lived on Joy, I lived on Grifton, I lived a couple different places.
Okay, but in general Akron area as far as?
Yes, in the Akron area, yes.
Okay, you grew up in Akron. Did you go to school, high school? in
Yes, I went to
Akron?
high school, East High School, Bookto High School,
And as far as work, what kind of work do you do?
selling cars, car lots, dealerships.
And were you familiar with a young man by the name of Keith Johnson?
Yes, he was my nephew.
And him being your nephew, what's the exact relation as to how he's your nephew?
His mother is my sister.
Okay. As far as Keith is concerned, was he born in Akron, Ohio?
Yes, he was.
And did he live in Akron throughout his life?
He lived in North Carolina for a few years as a kid. I guess maybe 6 to, I don't really know exactly how old he was, but they lived in North Carolina.
As a young adult, though, he was living in Akron, is that right?
Yes, yes.
And was he employed back in March of 2017?
Yes, he was. I know he was driving trucks, like dump trucks and big trucks. So
Do you know how long he had done that for?
2 to 3 years, as far as I know.
When we talk about March 20th of 2017, you live in a house. Do you recall him living in an apartment during that time period?
Yes.
And did there come an occasion where you were asked or you were willing to store a dirt bike at your residence?
Yes, he asked me, could he put the dirt bike in my garage, and I said, sure.
And was that unusual for Keith to be associated with a dirt bike?
No.
And why do you say that?
What do you mean?
As far as, was this the first time you've heard anything about a dirt bike from Keith? Or known him to have or use a dirt bike?
Yeah, I've seen him ride a dirt bike before.
And could you describe the dirt bike?
It's like a mini bike, like a 80 with fenders on it, blue, white type color.
And leading up to the incident that we're going to discuss, do you recall how long you had the bike there on your property?
Approximately 2 months, a month and a half. I can't be exactly sure because I really didn't pay attention to it.
Okay, you weren't writing down dates that you got the bike and,
No.
and all the rest of that, but you think it was about a month and a half or so. Is that fair to say, a rough estimate?
Yes.
As far as that particular dirt bike, did you know whether it was a stolen dirt bike or not?
No, I had no knowledge of if it was stolen or, I just knew it was his.
Okay. As far as it being in your garage, did you take it for rides, or did you have any interest in it, or was it just kind of in your garage? And
Yeah, I never rode it, I never sat on it or anything.
Mr. Sprangley, were you familiar with an individual by the name of Justin Badgett?
No.
What about a Brandon Ward?
Yes, I'm familiar with Brandon.
And how do you know Brandon?
He's good friends with Keith.
All right. Let's go back then to March 20th of 2017 into the evening hours. And were you home that evening?
Yes, I was.
And can you tell us what you were doing?
I actually was laying down. I was actually laying in the bed.
And you kind of gave us the bedroom. Is the bedroom in the back part of the house, front part of the house?
It's in the back part of the house.
Okay. And was anyone else there at the house with you?
Yes, a lady friend of mine was there.
Okay. Your girlfriend was there?
Yes.
And is there, at any time then, did you hear noise or realize that some other people were on your property?
Yes, I heard, at that point, I assumed that was my nephew because I heard the bike starting up, getting kicked, like whoop, whoop, whoop. You know, so once I heard that, I instantly knew that, you know, he was out there, or it must be him.
And you're in your bedroom at that time?
Yes, I'm in my bedroom.
And could you tell, was the noise coming from behind the house, side of the house, front of the
It
house?
was coming from behind the house. I had my back window cracked about so much, so I could hear like it was right there.
Take us then from that point on what you recall happening that evening.
From that point, I kind of heard the bike, I heard him out there, and I kind of let my window down and laid back down because I knew it was him. And, you know, so at that point I looked out the window and I seen him, so I just laid back down. And after a while, I heard the bike just going up and down the street or just getting rolled up, you know, as far as I know. And I got up to see, you know, what was he doing. And I went to the living room and I looked out the front window and I seen him coming down the street on the bike and stopping, talking to two white guys looking at the bike.
Okay. Let me stop you there.
I'm going to hand you, sir, what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibits 2C and 2D, both being photographs. Have you look at both of those and ask you if you're able to identify those photographs.
Yes, it's photographs of my house.
And these are photographs that the police took. These are not your photographs? Is
No,
that-
they're not
is
my
that fair?
photographs.
First of all, putting 2C on the docket cam, and could you just for the record and for the jury describe what we're looking at in that photograph?
This is the front door, the front of the house.
And when we look at 2D then, what are we looking at?
We're still looking at the front of the house, showing both the bedroom windows and the living room window.
And when you say that you were looking out the living room window, which window would we be talking about?
The large window.
And are we talking, when we look at the door, right or to the right or to the left?
To the left,
Okay.
my left.
And you can even mark on there, and if you touch the screen, it'll make a little mark. So that's the window, and you describe that as a big window, is that
Yes,
correct?
it's like a three windows in one.
And this being a police photograph, it looks like we got about two of the panes from that window. Is that
Right.
about right? So we don't even see the entire window in that picture.
Right.
As far as where you were looking out, is there blinds or shades? Can you describe what any kind of window covering there may have been?
It's sheer drapes, like curtains.
Okay. And those are obviously drawn. Are you looking out through the middle of the drapes?
Only way I
or-
can look out is through the middle. So I have both of them open like this. I have a sofa right there, a love seat. So I'm kind of on my knees looking out the window.
So the window, or excuse me, the couch goes up against the window there. And you're actually on your knees looking out the center part of that window. Is that
Right.
correct? We even see landscaping outside that window. Did that obstruct your view at all, if you recall?
No, I mean, you know, I'm very familiar with the area. Like I said, I've been living there forever, so I can see everything in front of me.
And if you were to give us an approximate distance from the front of your house to the street, how far away is that?
If I had to imagine 10 to 12 feet.
It's a relatively small front area of your house. Would you agree with that?
Right.
Also now going to put State's Exhibit number 1 on the on the screen. And do you recognize that overhead map?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
My house?
And it's the whole street, which includes your house, is that correct?
Yes, it's the whole, the front part of the block, yeah.
And we see 797 actually numbered in that picture, and that's where your house is located, correct?
Yes.
All right, so you're at the front of the house, looking through the front window, and tell us what you see at that time, what you see and hear at that time.
I seen my nephew talking to two guys. They both was on each side of the motorbike, and he's sitting across the motorbike. And one guy to the right had a cell phone or some kind of light, looking at the bike, So off top, I kind of thought he was trying to sell the bike or whatever. And at the same time, I'm sitting there on my cell phone trying to call his phone.
And why were you doing that?
Just because what's going on, it was quite a few people in the front of the house that was unusual. So I'm like trying to see what was going on. What you doing?
So the two people you see by your nephew, and can you describe them at all?
Yes, one was an older white male, approximately 40, and another younger white guy on the other side of him. But he was a step or two back. He wasn't up on the bike like close as the other guy was.
And did you recognize, or can you describe anyone else who was outside at that time?
It was a woman, an older woman, probably in her late 30s.
And where was she located when you were looking outside?
She were located right on the sidewalk in front of my house.
And you can point to it if you're about to.
Yeah, she was somewhere in this type area. Sorry.
That's all right. As far as Brandon Ward, did you notice if he was out there?
Yes, he was in the driveway. At the time I was looking out the window, he was, somewhere right in that area. Halfway between the house and the sidewalk.
So he was in the driveway halfway between the house and the sidewalk, correct? As far as vehicles, did you notice vehicles that were outside in front besides the dirt bike?
Yes, I noticed there was a pickup truck right in front of my house. We parked on the other side of the street, which would be this side of the street, and this truck was parked approximately on, right here.
Okay. Any other vehicles come to mind?
This also was a red pickup truck about right here.
As far as time of day, do you recall what the lighting was like at that time?
It was just getting dusk type of day, right before it get dark.
And do you have a street light right out there in front of your house?
Yes, it's a street light right out. There's two of them actually. There's one right here to the right and one more over here.
When you said for the first one, where was the first street light located?
Right here. This pole right there.
Right in front of your house. All right, so you were telling us that this 40-year-old white man was using kind of a flashlight or a light on his phone to kind of visually look at the bike, correct?
Right.
All right, take us from there then.
Well, from there, I seen my nephew, Keith, he was just, talking to the guy, and I don't know exactly what they were saying because I was on the other side of the window, but I did hear him say, well, make me an offer. And, I seen him shaking his head and stuff like that. And at that time, he went to start the motorbike up in the middle, turn the key, and, the guy tried to turn the key back off that was standing there with him. And at that time, Poopy just, kind of pushed his hand apart away and started the bike up.
And when you say Poopy...
I'm sorry, Keith.
That's a nickname that...
Yeah, that's his nickname, and, when I think of him, I think of that name.
Okay. And so you were indicating that the 40-year-old man had his hands on the bike and Keith was kind of pulling away from that.
Right.
And the bike was started at that point, if you know?
No, he kicked the bike on at that point.
Okay, and then what happened next?
He took off, headed south down Damien, and as soon as he kind of took off, woo, I heard a pop. And, so I started paying attention, like, what was that? Because I never heard the bike backfire before. And I thought it backfired. So I'm looking what was going on. And he kind of gets, maybe about 10, 15 feet away, and he wrecks the bike and falls, and like slides up under a car that, a guy's there working on the car, so the car is kind of like jacked up in the front. So he kind of like slides right up in that cubby.
Now, let me take you one step back. Someone said, make me an offer. Do you know whose voice that was?
That was Keith's voice.
That was Keith's voice. And when you said that he started heading in a south direction, we have Eastwood on one side, and then the other side of the street is just a dead end,
yes.
Correct? Was he heading towards Eastwood, or was he heading towards the dead end?
He was headed towards Eastwood.
And the cars, where approximately do you recall the cars that you indicated he had kind of run into or underneath, where were they located?
Like right here.
And you're showing across the street from your property, is that fair to say? Did you notice how many cars were parked there?
2.
And when he went down, were you able to see, I guess specifically, was he close to one car or the other, or in the middle of the 2 cars, if you can recall?
He was basically middle of the 2 cars, but the car that was in the back, it was the one that was like jacked, like lift up.
Okay. So the back car was on jacks and was being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
What happened next?
When he did fall, he kind of like slid up under there, and the one guy just ran over there trying to grab the bike at the same time. I figured that's what he's trying to do, get the bike. And
now, when you say the one guy ran over there, was it the
older white guy?
The older white guy that you described was around 40 years old,
right?
Correct. What happened next?
Well, he was trying to get the bike in, and Keith wasn't trying to let it go, and it was kind of, I could just see the look on his face, just like trying to get away, like, and the bike just roared up out of, just, if I'm saying it right, it just roared up in the air, like, he was like out of control of the bike.
He had lost control of the bike, in your opinion?
Right, because he was down on the ground.
Okay. As far as when he's down on the ground, then you're kind of showing me he's still on the bike, or is he off the bike when he's on the ground? You know what I'm asking, as far as, had he fallen completely off the bike?
He's like halfway off the bike.
And when he fell down, and did you say the bike had skidded when it fell?
Right.
Okay, what do you mean by it skidded when it fell?
In other words, the back wheel kind of up under the car, like,
You've heard the phrase tailspin?
Yep.
Would that accurately describe what you saw?
Yes.
What happened next?
Well, next, like I say, the guy ran over there is trying to get the bike, and the bike just was out of control, just up in the air. And I had already, when I heard the first pop, I had already was paying attention, like, what's going on? And at that time, I just seen the older white guy that was by the red truck just fire a weapon, and where he was at, I couldn't see because it was on the other side of the truck. I just know I didn't see Keith move anymore.
So after Keith spins out, is that the time you notice an individual with a weapon?
Yes, I was already, like, because I heard the pop, and I was already looking, like, where'd that come from? So
that individual, had you seen him at all prior to that moment? That individual?
Yeah, I seen him when I first looked. When I first heard the pop, I looked, like, because I didn't really see anyone fire a gun, but I just heard a pop, so I looked.
Okay. And then whereabouts do you see him?
He's approximately at the end of my driveway, but in the middle of the street, kind of like more to the other side of the street.
Okay. So in this being your driveway here?
Right.
And in the middle of the street was slightly
Yeah.
to the other side, is that fair to
Right.
say? And are you able to actually see him firing the gun?
Right, I could see him fire the gun.
And how do you know he was firing the gun? As far as, do you see flashes, or what indicates to you that it was being fired?
Objection, Judge, that's someone leading.
Sustained. How did you know it was a gun?
I could see him in the street with the weapon.
And you're showing us, the motion you're showing, how was he aiming the gun?
He was holding the gun, you know, just pointing it like that.
And you're showing, was it actually one hand underneath the butt of the gun? If you recall.
I don't know if it was right or left, but yes, it was like a, you know, like you'd be at a shooting range or something.
Now, as far as, so the last time you see Keith is when? And you're able to see him from the window?
When he was coming from up under the car.
Okay. So he had gotten back up, and then you hear the shot, and then you don't see him again?
Yeah, he was never really up. He was kind of like, the bike was taking him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like halfway, this leg is where he fell at, so he's still like halfway on the bike.
And I know we're taking it moment by moment. All this happens pretty quick, is that fair to say? Very quick?
Very quick.
As far as the lady that you had described out on the sidewalk, had you noticed her anymore during the course of these events as to where she was?
Yes, she's right in front of my house.
Did you ever see her move from in front of your house?
No, maybe to the double strip area.
To the double strip area?
Yes.
And when you said you saw the 40-year-old approaching Keith when he had gone down, did you notice where he was at the time of the shooting?
He was like right where he had just came from under the car. He was like right on the side of him, like right there.
You're pointing and saying, but so let me help you a little bit. You talked about two cars kind of being over here,
Right.
Is that correct? And the truck being over here.
Right.
As far as the last time you noticed the 40-year-old man, where's the last time you noticed him being?
Right on the side of the bike where Poopy would be. I'm sorry, Keith.
And when you say as far as where Keith ultimately ended up, or where he had kind of, when we said fishtail and
Where
scooted
he
down?
originally fishtailed at.
Okay, that's where he was. So after you see this individual shoot the gun and you don't see your nephew anymore, what do you do next?
At that point, I gets out the window and grab my shoes and my jogging pants to go outside to see about him.
I mean, what's your emotional state at that point?
Mind-boggling, basically heart beating, running fast, you know. At the time, I'm going down the hall and I yell, this guy just shot my nephew. Baby, this guy just shot my nephew. So and she jumped, what? And she's grabbing her stuff, so.
Let me take you back one step. After the shot, the last shot you heard, did you hear any voices or anybody say anything after that shot?
The first shot after that, I heard, you know, someone say stop him. And that's when I heard the shot and noticed the guy shooting from right there at the end of the driveway.
Okay. And do you know whose voice that was?
Objection, hearsay.
If you recognize whose voice?
No, I didn't recognize the voice.
So you're frantic. You tell your girlfriend what's happened and take us from there.
Like I said, I tell her what's happening. I grab my shoes, my jogging pants, and I use my back door to go out. I go out the back. I parks in the back and I go out the back. So I go out the back door, which at that time Brandon is beating on my door like full, like, you know, saying they just killed Keith when he said poopy, but
Objection.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
Motion to strike.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will strike that. You'll disregard what Mr. Ward was saying.
this was how long after the shots that Mr. Ward was banging on the door?
30 seconds, 40 seconds, you know, right away.
And he was right away, and he was banging on the door. Was it, I mean, how would you describe how he was banging on the door? Was it a calm banging when someone just comes to your door?
No, I have a steel door, and he was literally, oh, just hollering,
And as far as the tone of his voice?
frantic,
And,
scared.
And what did he say?
He just, basically, they just killed Poopy out here. That's what he's saying.
And what did you do then?
I told him I already seen it. I'm like, I know, I already seen it. I'm running out there.
And what happens when you get out there?
I seen my nephew, I run to him, and like I say, he's on the other side of the truck. So I run to him, and I realize, you know, he's gone, so.
How did you realize that?
I didn't do any kind of pulse or anything, but I tried to grab him, and he was just straight limp. He was nothing. He's a big guy, so his weight was just dead, so.
There's no signs that he was conscious?
No signs that he was conscious by the time I got out there.
He didn't say anything?
No, he was, and I'm not medical, but he was already gone.
Could you tell where he was injured?
No, because I really didn't want to see it.
Okay. Did you see blood or that he was in fact injured?
Yeah.
And what part of his body did you see that?
Running down his face.
You saw the gentleman in the road with a gun. Did you see anyone else with a weapon that night?
No, I did not.
And when you saw Keith just prior to going down, did you see anybody directly in front of him or the bike?
No, he had a clear sight to Eastwood. No one was in front of him.
Brian, just to clarify, when Keith went down, are you able to see him land, or is your view obstructed by that truck?
I could see him land.
I mean, are there portions where you are obstructed by that truck in trying to see everything that happens?
Is it a time that I couldn't see?
Are there times during the course of what's going on there where that truck is in your way at times?
Well, the best time I couldn't see is when he went down. I couldn't see him. I couldn't witness what was going on with him or nothing. That's why I was frantic trying to get outside so quickly.
I guess when I said he went down, you maybe thought I was talking about the first time. I mean, ultimately, when he went down after being shot, you could not see him
I could not see him.
Because of the truck. Is that
Because of
fair
the
to
truck.
say? Okay. No further questions, John.
If I could just have just a moment, Your Honor. Mr. Spraggling, is it fair to say that you were close to your nephew, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, I was close to him. It's fair to say.
And you let him store his bike in your place. Had he stored any other bikes at your place?
No.
When you're in the back bedroom, you hear him going up and down the street, is that correct?
Yes.
Is it safe to assume that he's on the dirt bike?
Yeah, I'm assuming that he's going up and down the street because it's kind of get loud and fades away and get loud again.
About how many times, if you remember, did he go up and down the street on his dirt bike?
Like I said, I was laying down trying to go to sleep at the time. So approximately 2 times. That's why I kind of like got up like, what is he doing?
Okay.
Because it's loud. Boom, boom.
When he's going up and down the street, sir, does it sound like he's out of control on the bike?
No.
there comes a point in time when you look out your living room window.
Yes.
All right. I think you told us we have shears in that window. Is that, we have to do this with every witness, sir. You have to give us a verbal answer
I'm sorry.
for the court reporter and the jury. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
It's not a criticism, just a reminder. Is it fair to say, or is it accurate to say, that you saw everything that night that you testified to from inside your house?
Yes.
And do you know about what time this happened?
It was approximately 8:53.
I would agree with that. The police logs tell us that's about correct. And you said it's about dusk, sir?
Yes.
All right. And there's a street lamp nearby, is that a fair way of putting it?
Yes.
The street lamp, when it's dusk, does that cast shadows?
I'm not familiar. What are you asking me?
If people are outside and it's around dusk, and you've got a street lamp nearby, are you seeing people in the shadow?
No, I can see them straight out.
Okay. Is it fair to say that in this this picture right here, this 797 is your house?
Yes.
And this black truck is right there?
Yes.
All right. That black truck is, for the most part, at least partially in front of your house?
Right.
And that's well, would you agree with me that is a pickup truck?
Yes.
It's let's call it a medium-sized pickup truck?
Yes.
You're on the phone inside your house trying to reach Keith Johnson on his cell phone. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yes.
All right. And are you able to reach him?
No, he didn't pick up the phone.
Okay. And at this point in time, do you see him talking to other people?
Yes, I
Out
do.
front. Okay. And did you give an interview to the police right after, well, within a couple of hours of this happening?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you hear the conversation that's going on outside?
The conversation.
Outside, in and around the dirt bike?
Yes, I could hear, mostly everything, but not everything exact.
Right. You're inside the house.
Right.
Okay. And that window is a, let's say, a living room plate glass window?
Yep.
All right. It doesn't have an opening, does it?
Yes, it opens from both sides.
All right. But it wasn't open that night,
wasn't
was it? It was pretty cold that night, wasn't it?
No, it was, last year we had a mild winter and, it wasn't really cold, jogging suit type weather, sweater.
In any event, the windows were closed.
Yes, the window was closed.
And you heard some discussion, correct, between Mr. Johnson and somebody, was it a white guy? Or how many?
It was two white males.
Two white guys, okay. And did you hear anything about a car title or bike title?
Yes, I could hear the guy, he had some paperwork in his hand. I don't know exactly what it was, but he was wanted to see the serial number.
All right. Did Keith want him to look at the serial number?
No.
And at a point in time, did Keith start up the bike or was it still running?
He started it up.
And did Keith then take off?
Yes.
Did one of the white guys, at least one of the white guys, try to reach for the handlebars?
Yes.
And Keith you said, that's my words, I guess, but you agree with me. He took off, correct?
Yes, correct.
And he was headed toward Eastwood, is that correct,
Yes.
sir? And at a point in time, or a distance, he somehow laid the bike down, is that correct?
Yes. He
Did he
failed.
stay with the bike?
Yeah, he's on the bike, so he kind of slid with the bike.
All right, so he never got out of the seat of the bike?
He was kind of like halfway on the bike.
Okay,
Like,
all right. And at a point in time, does Keith then lift the front wheel up on the bike?
well, I wouldn't say he lifted the front wheel up. I would say that he throttled it and it was out of control because he's trying to hold onto the handlebars. So
All right, well, let's put it this way. The front wheel came up, is that a fair way of putting it, sir?
yes, it is.
All right. At this time, the bike is pointed in the opposite direction, is that correct, sir?
It's more pointed in the direction of to my house,
All right.
like to that truck.
If he is going toward Eastwood, which is that way,
Yes,
correct, sir?
yes.
Okay. Oops, sorry. And then the bike turns around and now he's got it pointed toward your house.
Yes.
Is that almost 180 degrees? Never mind, I'll withdraw that. The bike is generally pointed back toward the dead end.
The bike's more pointed towards my house.
It's not pointed toward Eastwood anymore, is it?
No.
When you heard about this bike title and Keith starting up the bike, was it apparent to you that Keith wasn't giving up this bike?
Yes, it's very apparent to me.
Now, you saw an older white guy fire the weapon, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And was he standing near a truck?
Yeah, there's a red truck behind him.
Okay. And did he ever leave the area of that red truck?
Other than being in front of it, no, he didn't leave the area of the red truck, no.
Okay. In terms of time, is it fair to say from the time you saw the bike leave with Keith on it till Keith was shot and slid under the truck, how much time elapsed?
3-4 minutes.
So, you're saying that Keith and the bike went from here to here and back to here. It took 3 to 4 minutes?
He never went there.
Okay.
He never went that far down the road.
All right, well, all right. So he went from, let's say, in front of the black truck, okay, down what, one lot or one driveway?
Yeah, right there where the other 2 cars, marked for the cars right here.
So right about here. And then he gets halfway down on the bike and then comes back and shut. It takes 3 or 4 minutes.
I was saying it took 3 or 4 minutes all the time that I was in the window.
Well, that wasn't the question. The question was, from the time that he leaves the guy with his hands on the handlebars, goes down, turns around, comes back.
He didn't turn around.
All right. Well, he's headed toward Eastwood, right?
Right.
All right. And he's coming back up, correct? On the street.
He falls.
Okay. But he doesn't, he's got to come somewhat back up toward your house, doesn't he?
No, he's still like in front of the house.
Under the truck?
Look, what I'm trying to say is, when he was shot, that's when he was under the truck.
Yes.
It was over then.
Correct.
But before that, he was across the street under these cars where he wrecked at.
Right,
He fell off the bike.
right. And then somehow the bike gets turned around though and heads back toward your house.
Yes,
Okay. And that took, I think you just said 3 or 4 minutes?
that's not actually what I was saying. I was trying to say during the time I was in the window, the whole incident was 4 to 5, somewhere within there. I was on the phone when I first called him, so I kind of know.
Your original time frame includes the time that the people were talking about the bike at the time.
Right.
Okay. What I'm suggesting is from the time that Keith, I'm looking for a time, an estimate of time.
Go ahead.
From the time he leaves in front of the black truck and to the time that he's shot.
30 seconds, 40 seconds.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sprague, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Sprague, just clarification, just so there's no confusion. These two lines here, to be fair, they're just estimates that we drew as indicating the two vehicles across the street. Correct? I need to say yes or no?
Yes.
And one of those vehicles is the vehicle that's up on jacks and being worked on?
Yes.
Correct? And is it fair to say, or how would you describe where those two vehicles are in relationship to your property? As far as, are they down the street from you, are they across the street from you?
They're across the street.
And when you indicated before that Keith went down initially, not after he's been shot, but initially when he loses control, where in relationship to those two cars did he go down?
Right in between both of them, like basically right up under the front wheels of the back car.
So between the two cars?
Right.
So although he was heading south at that point toward Eastwood, now he's turned, and when you say he's facing your house, he's facing this way, correct? He's not facing this way.
Nope.
When you were asked about the older gentleman leaving the scene, as far as when Keith is down on the ground, did that gentleman go and check on the welfare of Keith?
Not to my knowledge, because I did leave the window to get my shoes and stuff, so.
When you came out there, where was he at that point?
Still standing approximately where he was, like in front of the truck. We're over close across the street now.
That would be the red truck, is that correct?
Yes.
No further questions.
One question, Mr. Sprague. The judge is going to hold me to this. The guy that we just talked about, the 40s type guy, when you saw him, was he in the street?
At what time?
From the time that the bike took off to the time you next saw him, I guess, across the street?
Yes, he was in the street.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sprague. You may step down.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will recess for the evening at this time. If you would report back tomorrow morning at 8:30, and from now on, I know up till now we've had you report to several different places, but from now on, your home is in the back of the courtroom in the jury room. So at 8:30 tomorrow morning, if you would please report there, and we will continue with testimony at that time. I'll remind you once again that you're not to speak with each other or anyone else about the case, including people at home. You are not to discuss the matter or look into any research or anything about this case. Have a good evening, and we will see you tomorrow.
All rise.